Welcome back. It's the other big story making international headlines. Leaders from government, civil society and business all set together today in Davos, that's in Switzerland, for the 2025 World Economic Forum. President Cyril Ramaphosa is leading the South African delegation for the first time in years, comprised mainly of business and government officials. South Africa goes to the forum as the president of the G20 group of nations. Expected the country, in fact, is going to take up the position of trying to be an attractive investment destinations to those who are gathered there. Let's try and make sense of this. Bring in Dr. Azar Jammine, economist, who's with us. He, of course, is the chief economist with Econometrix and joins us via our video line at this hour. Doc, great to see you as always. Thanks very much indeed for making time. Much of the commentary, including, I think, from an article from the Sunday Times yesterday, is around how South Africa has a unique opportunity to position itself in order to make the most of the WEF, because specifically we're going to be leading the G20 group of nations. My question to you is, what do you reckon are those low-hanging fruits that the country can hang on to as we put our best foot forward in Davos?
I think the most important one of all is the country's commitment to trying to effect a reduction in inequality around the world and trying to facilitate employment creation. Many of the challenges that we face in the South African economy are very similar to those that face the whole world. And as leader of the G20 this year, South Africa can actually transfer its approach towards trying to reduce inequality and create employment and encourage things such as education and infrastructural development and reduce corruption, all in the quest for higher economic growth and reduced inequality.
Yeah. There's often a lot said about the delegation itself that South Africa will be sending. The president this time is tagging along. Does that, I suppose, leave you feeling a whole lot more confident about perhaps even the strength of our sway over the week ahead?
Of course, it leaves one more confident. I think one of the important changes that has taken place in South Africa over the last 6 months has been that under the government of national unity, there has been an increased willingness on the part of the presidency and theoretically the government itself to embrace private sector interests in order to try and collaborate in addressing many of the structural impediments to economic growth. And by being present himself at this conference, President Ramaphosa will provide further confidence and insight into this collaboration between public and private sectors to try and resolve economic problems.
Right. We typically get a global risk report that's released by the World Economic Forum in the lead up to the gathering itself beginning. And as anticipated, I mean, there's been all manner of flags being raised, or things being highlighted, let me say, by this report in this iteration, including concerns really about global inflation and the impact that might have even on countries like South Africa. The question, I suppose, then becomes, to what extent do you find that gatherings like these are effective in addressing those kinds of issues?
I don't think gatherings like these are in any way effective in addressing those kinds of issues. They raise them and they flag them, but at the end of the day, it's up to central banks and governments to enact policies that work towards achieving, in this case, what you're talking about is a reduction in inflationary pressures. On this occasion specifically, there are heightened inflationary fears arising out of the fact that incoming US President Donald Trump is suggesting that he wants to impose big import tariffs on countries that are exporting to the United States. That's the majority of countries in the world. And the risk of that is that there will be the retaliatory tariffs imposed on exports from the United States to these countries. And what one will be left with is a big increase in inflation around the world that in turn will oblige countries to keep interest rates higher than would otherwise have been the case, which would be negative for global economic growth.
Yeah, I mean, there's, for example, another issue that this report flags is what they're calling economic warfare. And you speak about Donald Trump, and immediately what comes to mind are some of those tariff-related threats he's made to a whole host of countries, including those that form part of the BRICS group of nations, including South Africa, around imposing tariffs if there were to be a currency introduced by BRICS. You know, because his inauguration is coming up, I imagine there'll be a heightened sensitivity to see how he, I suppose, treats the first 100 days in office with these threats in mind. And again, the question becomes whether or not any of those who are going to be at the World Economic Forum in Davos could keep someone like Trump in check if he were to see through some of these threats.
I don't know that Donald Trump is a person that actually is amenable to be kept in check by anyone. Trump's own objectives are to push through his reforms immediately. And at a rally, a pre-inauguration rally yesterday, he made no bones about the fact that in today's inaugural speech, we are likely to hear and receive information about the imposition of new laws that are going to impose tariffs, that are going to restrict illegal immigration and will enforce deportation. And we're going to hear about tax cuts as well, and moves to deregulate a lot of what has been put into place by the preceding Biden administration. So, and he's made it quite clear that it'll not be a matter of months or through which he will impose these changes, but he intends to announce them today already. Now, how the BRICS story is a little different because there is no concrete evidence of BRICS actually designing a new currency in opposition to the dollar. And in fact, it wasn't even discussed at the most recent BRICS meeting in Moscow. So it is a bit of a red herring, but it just shows, is an indication of the polemical way in which Trump is approaching international economic relations. And the big question is, how seriously should we take him? The proof of the pudding will be very much in evidence in a short space of time, I think.
Absolutely. Interesting 24 hours ahead, perhaps interesting 4 years ahead. Dr. Azar Jammine, as always, thanks for speaking to us. Appreciate the insights. Dr. Jammine is the Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix. Once again, thanks very much indeed.